Hey, Action Books, thanks so much for having me here on the floor of my own bedroom next to my poetry collection, such as it is these days. I am Candice Wuehle, and I wrote this book, Death Industrial Complex, and I am forever grateful to Action Books for publishing this back in 2020, the year that the world changed. And I'm here today for this Criterion Closet style sharing of some action books. So I'm going to tell you three of my favorite action books. Technically going to sneak in two to start with. Maria Negroni, Mouth of Hell. But before we get to Mouth of Hell, I want to talk a little bit about Dark Museum, also Maria Negroni. This is from the Salvo series at Action, which I love. So it's actually one of my favorite things that the press does. Salvo series connects critical theory, a lot of texts that you probably wouldn't ordinarily see coming together. So for example, let's just flip through this. We've got Frankenstein in here. We've got Captain Nemo. We've got Aliens, Intergalactic Galaxy. So we have all of these different things coming together. Really, a Salvo series book is like you're wandering around the tunnels of a Gothic castle and you never know which dungeon you're going to end up in at the end. So, Mouth of Hell is a book that's sort of about what if monsters talked. It sort of captures the syntax and the utterance of the monster. And so I'm just going to read you a little bit from the end of the introduction of this book, The Poet's Grotto. The poet monster knows that he reveals the world, but only while locked inside it, like a lost relic. He walks among gods, all the while destroying what he desires, suspecting that he might be no more than a mere projection of himself, and believing that he plays at living, when in fact he plays at death. Such is the monster's fate. He must die so his soul, fixing death into rhymes, can sing. Then his poem is left like a garden of mirrors of self-allegories, burgeoning in all its grotesque, specular beauty. The monster, poor maker of enchantments, of phantasmagoric fascinations that, in a final act of speech, perhaps suffice to show that the world itself can dissolve, that the world too might have a veritable monstrous double, a place where all things and even humanity itself risk dissipation by their crimes. There poetry persists, enduring historical time as that tiny light that sounds, thirstier for white words. And that introduction is by Jorge Monteleone. I don't know if I pronounced that right. I'm sorry. But okay, so this picks up on a thread that I think exists in every action title that I adore, which is sort of this idea of the double, of the uncanny, and not only this exploration of the many different ways in which the uncanny presents itself in the world, but also an application of the uncanny onto, more than just disturbed rich white people, right? Which is often where we see uncanny presentations. So next I'm going to pick up on the trilogy. I read this back in Joyelle McSweeney's seminar back in the day when I was in it in 2013, I think, and I did not realize how deeply this stack of poems she handed us really imprinted on me until I was rereading Death Industrial Complex recently. So again, we pick up on this idea of the uncanny. And, one of the things that I think really influenced me about trilogy is this idea of the self outside the self as a sort of doppelganger. And I don't mean like the self outside the self in a dissociative way, but I mean the recognition that comes from seeing the self from outside and the space in between the embodied self and the self over here, like this area in between. So I'm going to read you a little bit of a longer section in here just because it's so sick. It's awesome. So this is draft for one of Death's speeches. I was gasoline in the machinery of darkness, the ticking meter between your ribs, a negative response to the millionaire's question, a dead heat between love and sex, the frightened rabbit's eye inside the magician's hat. I wrote the specter next to that line. I became the river you burned behind you, a treasure map trying to erase its X. A flame where no moths gathered, a scraped knee hurled through a scoured castle. I was a leaf of grass, surviving the drow. We get a little Whitman drop there. A matchbox held tight by a child afraid of the dark. The mannequin who stepped through the bulletproof glass and followed you home. That is metal. I was the red hot years gone cold in our ashtray. I love this line. A bluebell tattooed on the dictator's cheek. Striped straws in a shady cafe, was the heart and the arrow and the graffiti of born losers, was the track walking behind the train like an old friend, was the rain-spiced bite you took of yourself. I was the headphones of death where life hummed falsely and out of tune. I was a razor blade factory with walls of skin and bone to show a way out of here. Bound to deal with things like the flickering of white sheets stretched from pole to pole. And it goes on. I've marked this up. This is a long poem. I mean, you gotta want to read that. And then finally, I'm going to end with what I think was the very first action book I ever read, Skin Horse by Olivia Cronk. And I also have such a specific memory of seeing Olivia read from this at Prairie Lights. And it was so cool. Olivia had a little old, like, antique thumb piano that she played as she read through this, and I remember that being a time, a point of like permission as this magic granting gesture for me as a poet, where I was like, oh, you can do stuff like that. So I'm just going to read you a little bit of the very first poem in this book. I really think of Olivia as post-Plath, not just an inheritor, but taking this beyond the stream, beyond the tradition of domestic horror. Here we go. I did not think you would find this forest. How much have you seen? My crisp muslin skirt nursed to chair at dinner? The display of burning orange white when he and I in the window watch your old friends, the naked squids hung from a tree branch screaming. Who? All right. Thank you, Action, for having me. And thank you for letting me bring my emotional support celebrity, Nicole Kidman. I know you didn't ask her to be here, but I needed her. Okay. Bye, guys. Love you.